What is up, everyone? Today we start on a bit of a new journey, I suppose, for the channel, and that is saltwater aquariums. Now, if you're a beginner, if you're curious about reef keeping, well, this is where we're going to be. We are going to build this aquarium together, but I warn you now that reef keeping is something that takes a long time. It's not throw it all in and see how it does. This is a week by month process that we're going to go through together. Now, I've kept reef aquariums before. I've kept fish only aquariums, I've kept corals, I've kept anemones, I've kept all sorts, alongside selling it in the shop for many years. So this isn't necessarily my first aquarium for saltwater, but I'm going to build it like it's my first aquarium. Now, in theory, any aquarium can be a saltwater aquarium. You can convert freshwater aquariums. You can, pretty much make any aquarium saltwater. The main thing is that can be quite tricky. There are lots of options out there for equipment, for different filtration, for different skimmers, and the way that essentially a saltwater tank can work. So we're going to keep this simple and as beginner friendly as possible, and that's why I've picked up the new TMC, the first wave aquarium. It's essentially a really easy entry into saltwater aquariums. It is 48 litres, so it's not a massive aquarium, and it does go to stand that the bigger aquarium you get, the more stable the parameters are. But as with anything, that means that the price goes up. So I think this is going to be a good place for me to give you an introduction into keeping all of these amazing little rock pool saltwater creatures. Now, I've just realised that even though it was good for the video to chuck this tank up here, I've actually got to unbox it quicker than I thought. I was actually thinking I was going to talk to you a lot longer about everything, but I've realised that as we go through this video, I can talk to you about the salt and the RO and testing and using refractometers and all those things. I can teach you all of that as we go. So yeah, we really need to get this off and unboxed so I can start talking you through getting this essentially aquascaped. But again, to make this beginner friendly, we're going to do this super simple. Now, as I say, with a saltwater aquarium, you can aquascape it pretty much the same as what you would a freshwater aquarium. You can use individual pieces of rock, you can essentially make it look however you want it to look. Obviously, this one's a little bit different, and I wouldn't suggest using wood in there because that just won't go well with a saltwater aquarium. But you can use pretty much any small types of reef-designed rock to go in this aquarium. You can glue it all together, you can putty it all together, depending on what is easiest for you to access, and you can build up a really cool rock structure with caves and, you know, overhangs, places to situate your corals. It is really good fun to do. This one, we have got one piece of rock that is man-made rock that is like a centerpiece, and I'll show you that in a second. This tank is stuck in this box. Got it. Now, another reason I do like these TMC first waves is they're actually really clever, and they all come with low voltage DC pumps and lights and skimmer. So it all plugs into one plug. So you've got essentially three pieces of equipment that you'd normally have separate plugs for, all running off of one plug, which does make it easier. That can go down there. Right, sand. Where did we put it? One bag of coral sand. Now, in theory, with saltwater aquariums, you can actually use any type of coral sand or coral gravel, anything like that. I prefer using the finer stuff. I just personally think it gives a nicer look, but any of those sands that are going to help buffer the water and keep the water stable are going to be perfect. Now, I'm really hoping that I don't need to wash this sand, but we shall see. Sometimes sands are dusty, and it is well worth giving them a rinse out first. But I think that this is looking fairly clean. Now, another thing I didn't actually mention about sand in reef aquariums is a lot of the time you want a fair amount of flow going around in this aquarium. So having a really fine aquarium sand actually means it just ends up blowing around in the aquarium all the time, and essentially making your aquarium look sort of cloudy. And yeah, we don't need that. So we've not gone for like a super fine gravel or sand, but it's going to be heavy enough that it won't work up into the water column. Now, as I say, we are going to keep this super simple and use one piece of rock. As we're going through this series and probably through this video, we will add a little bit more live rock and bits and pieces to help us mature it. But for the minute, I'm going to use one of these Eco Reef centerpieces just as my main structure because, well, it's just going to be easier, especially if you're just starting out. You can understand what you're doing and not have to mess around with creating your own aquascape. So that's going to be perfect. Loads of swim throughs, loads of areas for fish to hide, loads of plateaus for corals. It's ideal. Do you know what? I don't know if there's actually a way up this is meant to go. I quite like that plateau there. That plateau there is a really good spot to place some corals. So I think we're going to pop that towards the top. And it will need more eventually, but this is learning, this is starting, this is a beginner's thing. We're going to stick with that for the minute. And to be fair, that on its own looks really cool. Once we get some corals and maybe some coral rubble out in this open area, it's actually going to look really good. Right, now the next thing I do want to talk about is RO water and saltwater mixing. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that people make coming into the saltwater hobby is by using tap water. Now, it is one of those things. I have used tap water myself in the past, probably 8-9 years ago maybe. I set up a 200-ish litre aquarium for saltwater with tap water, and it went well for 6 to 8 months, I reckon, and then the algae started to grow. Because of the amount of nutrients that can be in tap water, it can cause you problems, and it would be a disservice to you for me to tell you, yeah, you'll be fine, go and use some tap water in your reef tank, you'll have no problems at all. Because I am talking to you, and you are all over the globe. You are in England, you're in America, you're in India, Australia, wherever you are from, your tap water will be different to my tap water. So even if my tap water was absolutely fine, well, I don't know what your tap water is. So the safest option is to use RO water or reverse osmosis water, which for this video, I've actually gone and bought, which was the easiest way. Most of your fish shops in the local area will sell RO water. Again, make sure they're a decent quality saltwater aquarium shop. Make sure they've got good looking stuff because, well, RO can differ. Again, depending on how good the filters are and how many stages there are on the filters and so on and so on, it might not have filtered out all of the waste. Now, for a future project, I am going to be setting up this RO unit in the fish garage because RO water is really good for freshwater fish as well, especially some of the rarer stuff that wants like really low pHs or specific water conditions. Then yeah, it is really good. So we'll do that in a future video, and we'll probably sort of delve deeper into RO and DI and mixing up salt water a bit more in depth in a longer video, because yeah, I'm trying to do this video as little short snippets of each bit so you get a good foundation knowledge of everything, rather than me sitting here for an hour and talking at you about reverse osmosis and total dissolved solids, which is TDS, that you will see mentioned in this video and probably future ones. So yeah, I think we're just going to get on and put some RO in there and get our salt mixed up. So we've got our bucket of salt. So this is just a pre-mixed reef salt that we can add to our RO to make up the salt water we want. Most pre-mixed salt buckets have magnesium, calcium, carbonate hardness all set up so that it's the right levels for what you want for your reef aquarium. Now, normally I would do this outside of the aquarium. Normally I would mix up the amount that I want in a separate container or even in the barrels that I've got the water in, heat it up, make sure I've got it to the right salinity, and then pour it in. Obviously, because there's no animals in here at the moment, I don't need to worry about that. So we're just going to chuck the RO water in and mix the salt water up in there. That'll be absolutely fine for this starting point. Now I'm going to try and not disturb everything too much by putting a bucket lid in there. Where did I put my barrel of water? Up here. Now I'm hoping sneaky. I don't think this is going to work actually, because that's going to dribble water all over the cabinet. Right, okay. Back to the drawing board. So because I've made a bad decision in putting this tank on a shelf, I'm having to use my water change watering can to fill up this tank, but that's fine. Somewhere in the house, I do have a water change pump that fits in those barrels. Do you think I can find that right now? Of course I can't. So for the minute, we'll just use our trusty watering can. With the water in, we do need to mix some salt into here in a minute, but I want to actually get the pumps running on here first, because that will mean we've actually got circulation. So when we pour however many grams or kilos of salt into the aquarium, it won't just sit in a pile on the bottom. So let's get all the equipment out, get all that situated in there, and then we can measure our salt. And I'll show you how to use a refractometer. In the saltwater world, equipment can be quite vast and quite confusing, let's say, but for a simple little saltwater aquarium like we're going to be setting up, we are going to keep it simple. We're going to be going return pump, we are going to be going skimmer, and we're going to be going a heater as well, obviously, and the lighting to help our corals grow. Now eventually you could add an extra circulation pump to this aquarium to give you more flow, and there are tons and tons of additions that you can make, but we are not going down that route just yet. Let's get the tank up and running and get some actual life in there first before we start messing around with other equipment. Now I do like this first wave for the sheer fact it comes with all the equipment that you could really want. Other than a heater, you do have to buy the heater separately, but that is fairly simple because it's just a simple glass heater that I've already got down here. Now, one bit of equipment that if you're coming from the freshwater side of the hobby that you won't be used to having is this, and that is a protein skimmer. I can't stand it up because the cable comes out the bottom, but these are really, really clever pieces of kit. Now all that happens, you can see in here, is there's a pump in the bottom that throws water and loads of tiny little air bubbles up into this middle chamber here. Those bubbles rise, and they come up into this cup here, and as they come up into this cup here, they pop. And then what you get in this little cup is it's just a pull off or a twist, not even sure. It's a pull off. So in this cup up here, what you get is essentially a horrible, disgusting brown scum. It's the easiest way to describe it. And that is essentially all the waste from your aquarium being essentially driven out. So the bubbles sort of get coated with the waste, if that makes sense. And then as they rise and they pop, they sort of keep all of that waste at the top. It's a very weird thing to actually describe once you think about it. Same way as blowing bubbles. When you blow a bubble and it pops on the floor and you see that residue, well, that residue is all the gunk that's left in that bubble. And the same thing happens in here. It's just you're making bubbles with fish and coral poo, which is a bit grim to think about, to be honest. So now how this filtration works is it's very similar to what you get in a freshwater aquarium. The water comes through the grills on the far side here, drops into a baffle, and it's essentially like an over-under in the back of this chamber. So this skimmer just sits down inside this one and suction cups to the back. I think I've got that right. I might actually have to take that skimmer out because I've got to put the sponges in now, and the sponges go underneath the skimmer, but maybe I can squeeze them in. So next door to the skimmer, we've got some sponges. Now we also have got some ceramic biomedia as well. Now, a lot of people will say to eventually take this out and replace it with live rock rubble, just because this processes stuff quicker than live rock does, as in processes waste. To be honest, this is such a small aquarium, and I'm going to be doing a fair amount of water changes weekly on it. Well, not a fair amount, but 1 week water change every week or so. I'm not overly worried about running that, so that is going to go in there as well. Now, what it recommends to do is put a sponge in first, and this is where that skimmer might be in the way. Can I get that underneath? No, we're fine. Loads of room to do it. Then the biomedia sandwiched between that sponge. The biomedia doesn't have as much give in it as a sponge. And then lastly, the other sponge. And then this dinky little pump just sits down inside here, and we have circulation, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. Nozzle through, and then we just stick the nozzle on the end of there. That is all of the equipment that fits onto that one plug that I was telling you about. So the pump, the skimmer, and the lighting, we just need to pop the heater in now. So we're going to set this heater to around 24, 25 degrees Celsius and then stick it in that end compartment. Is that everything? Yep. Where are we? 24, around there. And then that one can just go in the end compartment, in theory, next to the skimmer, I think. Now, as we've got the rest of the equipment on, we might as well get everything situated and turn the light on as well. Now, down here somewhere, we should have, there we go, essentially our 3-cabled extension lead to get this tank up and running. So our skimmer, our light, and our heater all plug into that. Right. I lost the lighting plug there for a minute, but I found it. 1, 2, 3. Right, we're running. So now it is just a simple case, whoa, of pressing that button. And we've got the 3 different lighting settings. So yeah, it's on, blue, and then that starts a timer, which I've not read up on yet, but it's some sort of timer that does a light cycle. So let's just have it white for the minute so we can see what we're doing. So next up, we need to measure out the amount of salt that we need. And I'm just going to be using some kitchen scales for this. Sorry, Katie, I will buy my own kitchen scales at some point. Katie does a lot of baking and I've just borrowed these. Now, it is quite surprising how much salt you do need for a reef aquarium. I remember doing one of my big tanks and I ended up pouring a bigger bucket than this straight into it for the first mix of salt water. I was like, what? That's a whole bucket of salt. But yeah, it is one of those things. It does take a lot. Now, this is, where are we? 37 grams, approximately 37 to 40 grams per litre of water. So that tank being a 48 litre full to the brim, 48 times 37, did I say 37 grams? Yeah. So about 1.77 kilos of salt to go in that aquarium. So I'll put in 1.7, we'll let it mix, and then I can always bring it up slightly. It's always easier to underdose salt and then bring it up slightly than it is to pour everything in and go, I put too much in, because then you've got to take salt water out, replace it with RO water. It is a nightmare, and until you get used to it, it's probably easier to mix it at a lower level and then go, I need to bring it in, I need to put 10 grams in more or something along those lines. That's certainly how I'm going to do it while I'm mastering mixing salt water again for the first time in about 10 years. So there you go. That is how much salt needs to go in to this aquarium to get it to the right salinity. And it seems like a lot, doesn't it? Look at how much is in there compared to how big that tank is. But the sea is salty, so yeah, maybe it isn't that much of a surprise. Now, as I say, if I did have animals in this tank, I would not be mixing the salt water in situ. I would be taking the water away from the tank. Or not away from the tank, what am I talking about? I've been mixing up the water outside of the tank, making sure it's up to temperature, up to the right salinity, and then I'd be placing it in the aquarium. But for the minute, we can just do this. Now, until the salt actually mixes in to the aquarium, there's not a lot else that we can actually do. We will need to test the water for the salinity at some point, which is the amount of salt that we've obviously put in there. Hopefully that works out right. Hopefully I didn't mess it up on those calculations. I really hope that there's not a load of you in the comments now going, your maths was wrong, you put too much in. But we'll find out when we test it in a bit. Just realised how light this tank is and how dark I am, but hey ho, we're getting there. So once we come to testing the water, we have got refractometers. Well, not refractometers, we've got a refractometer, which is one of these guys, and we have also got a hydrometer, which is a less accurate way of doing it, but it does come in handy sometimes to have it. But refractometers are always much, much more accurate. But once that's mixed in, I will bring you all back. It will probably be later on this evening, I expect. Once all that salt's dissolved, we can test it all up. Then we're on to the next stage of the tank. So yeah, I'll bring you back in the next couple of hours, which will be all of a few seconds for you, and we'll test the water and see if I got the salinity right. So we are back. It's the next day and the tank has cleared up absolutely lovely. So in theory, we are ready to test for our salt water. Everything's mixed in, and I'm just hoping that my measurements and my calculations were correct. But it won't be that far out anyway. Even if it is, I'll be able to either take some salt water out, add some fresh water or RO water to bring the salinity down, or I can add more salt if I need to. But for that, we are going to be using a refractometer, so that will test our salt water in a second. And then after that, well, essentially we're waiting. Now I have gone to a shop and picked up a few bits of live rock rubble to chuck in the filter, which we will do once I know that the salt water is correct. So as I've said, testing salt water is fairly easy, and there is two ways of doing it. One being a refractometer, one being a hydrometer. Now, the hydrometer is certainly not as accurate as the refractometer. So for this video, I am going to be using mainly the refractometer, but just so you've got an overview of everything, I try and give you all the information. So here it is. This is a hydrometer. So if you are sort of short for time, or you're a little bit pressed for time, these are quite useful. Now, looks very much like a glass thermometer from the outlook, and that bit is actually a thermometer. And what you've got in here is you've got this little green band that you can see here, and that is roughly where you want to be sort of aiming for your salt water to be. And when you put that in the water, essentially it will bob up and down, and as long as the water level is at that green level, you should in theory be ready to go. But like I say, that is a very quick and quite simple way of doing it, but refractometers are by far the best option because they are just way more accurate. So what we need to do is calibrate the refractometer first. So I'll show you all the instructions in a minute, but it is really, really simple. Now this is, where's my screwdriver? A refractometer. Now you get a little screwdriver, you get a little pipette normally to squirt water onto it, and you get your main thing. You look down through this end, you have light hit this plate here, and you sandwich water in between that plate and that plate. And then in theory, when you look through it, I'll show you the graph in a minute, you should be able to work out what salinity your aquarium is at. But first, what I actually need to do is get a little bit of RO water, which is how we're going to calibrate it and essentially bring that refractometer to 0 so that we know what we're testing is accurate and correct. And that we do need RO water for. Now this might be quite tricky for me to do with trying to film it and trying to do it all in one go, but all I'm going to do is use the pipette to get a bit of RO water out of there. Now if I can bring it up, I'll show you a few drops on there. We're going to sandwich that down like so. Now I don't know if you're going to be able to see, but you make sure that there's no air bubbles and it's like completely covered in water, so that, well, essentially you're not getting any misreadings or anything like that, and then you can pretend to be a pirate. So all I'm going to do is find a bit of light, look through it, and see where we're calibrated. So that is actually fairly close to 0, maybe just a little bit of calibration, which is this little screwdriver and this little screw on top of here. Let's have a look. Somewhere about there. Right, we are at 0. Now let me show you the graph, because the graph is in the instructions and I can show you what I was actually looking at, because I don't think that, oh, you sort of can see it, can't you? Look at that. So that's the graph. Let me show you in the instruction manual though, because it's way easier. So this is a little pamphlet you get with the refractometer. Now in this bottom corner here where the shininess is, you can see that little graph. Now inside you might have been able to see a bit where like blue met white, or sort of light blue met dark blue. That is exactly where your salinity is. So obviously, because I was testing RO water then, it was right down at 0, which is where it should be. And every time you calibrate it, you need to use RO and calibrate it down to 0. Now we can test our salt water. Now you've got two different measurements on this scale. You've got SG on the left, which is standing for specific gravity, and you've got salinity on the right. It depends which one you want to use. On the salinity side of things, you're looking at aiming between 33 and 35%, which is tricky to see on camera, but yeah, 33 to 35%. If you're looking at specific gravity, it's essentially 1.023 to 1.025, which is obviously just over this side. It's much easier once you've got a refractometer in your hand to see it, because the definition between that blue and that white, or blue and light blue, is really easy to discern. Now, this is exactly the same procedure as what we just done with the RO. The only difference is now I need to make sure, I've just filled that with salt water and I wasn't really ready. We need to make sure, just wipe that lens off, that there is no RO left on this refractometer, because what you can find is, because you're dealing with such small amounts of water underneath or on top of this lens, however you want to say it, what you can sometimes find is if you don't clean it off properly, or you leave a bead of RO water on there, it skews the test results, and no one needs that. Right, so in theory we're doing the same thing, little drop of water, bringing that plate down, making sure there's no air bubbles, and pretending to be a pirate. Yeah, so we're running 1.025, maybe slightly high, maybe 1.026, but that's easily remedied because I can bring it down with just removing, you know, what, a jug or two of water, and then topping it back up with RO. And I'll save that salt water because I can always use that as a little water change next week once we start cycling and messing around with this aquarium. But to be honest, I think we're fairly good. I think we are ready to get that live rock rubble in, and also dose some live bacteria to help us get this cycle going. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to do to get this tank cycling. As I already mentioned, I went and picked up a couple small pieces of live rock. Now, I made sure that they were from an invert system. Now, might not make sense if you're coming into this from the outside world and never kept marines before, but essentially an invert system means that it's only got shrimps and snails and anything like that on it. If you get it from a fish system, you don't know if that shop has treated that system at any point with a product that may cause you problems with livestock. So there are treatments out there that get used on saltwater fish. That fly is really annoying. Anyway, there are treatments out there that get used on saltwater fish that means it then isn't safe for things like hermit crabs and snails. Now, as we go, I will obviously add more bits of live rock and more bits of, coral and things, so the rock will increase in size. Now, let's get just a couple of tiny little bits. One little bit there. Let's pop that next to that bit. We can extend the foot of our rock out, and then a couple of tiny little bits. Again, we'll just spread them around that base of that bigger rock, because then the bacterias and things that are on these rocks can start spreading to the rest of it. Now, the live rock will obviously have some bacteria on it, but NT Labs Satus will also introduce bacteria into this aquarium and essentially help the cycle get going a bit faster. What we'll also do is we'll add some food in there, because that will then provide a food source for things living on the live rock and also a food source for the Satus. Now, the good thing is with Satus is it is really quite concentrated, so you dose it higher at the start and then you slow down on dosing once you've got the tank established. So for this point, we're going to be using just under 5 ml, which is a capful. That can go in there, and that will start to seed the man-made rock and also help whatever is living on the live rock as well. And then lastly, what I'm going to do is just add a few of the probiotic marine pellets in. I should have opened that properly off of camera. I thought just poking a hole in it would have been enough. But this will just provide a bit of a food source to anything that's in there. There might be some things living in the rock that will come out and eat it. Things like copepods and amphipods and all the different weird bugs that you can get. Or, like I say, it will just provide a food source for the bacteria to get going. And pretty much we leave it now. We can test it regularly, so we'll be testing it for ammonia, nitrite and nitrate, and waiting for that sort of cycle or that thing to hit and to get going. Once we see that all decrease and go and work through, well, we're ready for animals. The only thing that you may find is I've used Satus in previous tanks and it gets the cycle going so quickly. Sometimes you don't see any of this if you're not testing really regularly. So it is a bit of a funny one, and especially putting live rock in there with more bacteria on it, between that and the Satus, I might not even see that much of a spike from the small amount of food. But we'll get it going, we'll get the cycle going, we'll wait for some stuff to start appearing, maybe a bit of algae, and then we'll go and get our first inhabitants for this tank. So well, I'll bring you back in the next 5 seconds and show you what we're going to go pick up. So here we are. We are 2 weeks from when you last saw us. Just over 2 weeks, roughly. But everything has been testing up perfectly. I did add a little bit more food in there, but to be honest with you, nothing has tested up. So in theory, with adding the Satus and adding that food source and not seeing much or any of an ammonia spike, actually, we're pretty much ready to go. There is not going to be any more waste in 2 or 3 hermit crabs than the food that I've been putting in there. You know, I was putting maybe 9 or 10 granules in. So yeah, hermit crabs, our first fish in there, aren't going to make that much more waste than that. So today, I tested it 2 days ago and we were good to go. I will test it again for you all now so you can see the testing and what's going on with it and everything like that. And then we'll go and get some hermit crabs, maybe a snail. There's been a bit of algae, so maybe a snail. Now these NT-Lab test kits are really simple to use. All you've got to do is follow the instructions on the back. So it's all really simple with just like step by step, how long you've got to wait for each one. Yeah, I've been using the freshwater test kits obviously a lot more than the saltwater ones, but they're all really simple. So we've got ammonia, we've got nitrite, we've got our pH, and we've got our nitrate. It probably only takes maybe 15 minutes because the ammonia one you've got to wait 10 minutes for and the nitrate one you've got to wait 10 minutes for. So it probably takes you roughly around sort of, yeah, 15, maybe 20 minutes once you get used to it to actually get this test going. Now eventually there will be a few other things to test for in a saltwater aquarium, especially if you're wanting your corals to grow fast and well. Things like magnesium and calcium and all sorts of other things do come into it. But while we're just getting this tank up and running and cycling, really the only ones we need to be worrying about is the pH, ammonia, nitrite and nitrate. This is essentially the nitrogen cycle, so it is just making sure that all the bacteria is working and breaking down waste in your aquarium. Now, if you're unsure of anything in the nitrogen cycle, there are videos that I'll link in the description for the nitrogen cycle and also testing your water. So we are finished with the testing. The nitrite one only takes 2 minutes and the ammonia and the nitrate takes 10 minutes. Oh, and the pH you read instantly. So these results might be a bit funny now. These two have obviously had way longer than they should have before reading them, but that is absolutely fine. So that's our ammonia. We're down at 0, which is absolutely fantastic. We've got our nitrite, which is at 0, so ideal. Nitrate, we've got a slight hint, but that's obviously where that food is, and there's nothing using it up as a food source, and I've done no water changes on it after putting that food in, so that's absolutely fine. And the pH was fine, and yeah, still reading fine. It's a little bit lower now, but that's probably because I've left it for nearly 12 minutes before recording it. So let's go and get some animals for this aquarium. We're not going to go crazy with marine aquariums, and to be fair with freshwater aquariums, take it slow, do it little by little, bit by bit. We're going to get maybe 2 or 3 crabs, maybe a snail, and maybe some more live rock rubble. We're going to get that in there, let it settle down for another couple of weeks, and then see what else we're doing. But let's go to the shop and see what they've got. I know this is going to be hard to walk out of that shop with just some crabs, but it's all right. We can show the cool things that we can get in here eventually. We don't need to buy them yet. So here we are, Maidenhead Aquatics at Sanders. Now it would be really easy to get swept away and buy fish and buy corals and all those things, but you really do need to be patient. Things like these red bubble tip anemones are really sensitive and can make an aquarium crash very simply if put in too early. Now a display tank like this is something to strive for. This is absolutely stunning, and hopefully one day our little 48-litre saltwater aquarium can look, well, even half as good as this. Now there are quite a few different species of hermit crab and snail and shrimp and things that you can get for these aquariums. Really, it's talking to a local knowledgeable shop and working out which ones are going to be best for you with regards to size and what they eat and everything like that. We are going to be going for some of these little dinky red leg hermits though. These are going to be perfect for that tank. They don't grow too big, they're really easy to care for, they are absolutely ideal. So we have got our jug of saltwater animals to go in this aquarium here. Now you saw a little bit of today's road trip around, but if you want to see a bigger version of it, there is a bigger video, should be already out on the channel now, of the road trip. I went to visit J&K and picked up some big bits of wood and some soil for a future project, and went and visited my friend Pond, picked up some saltwater creatures, and also visited my old shop to pick up some freshwater bits that are over in the tank over there already. But this is the last job of today, is to get these little guys acclimatized, and I'm so excited to see some life in there. Now what I'm going to do to acclimatise these little guys is actually just use a drip line method. Now all it is a piece of air line, so you can see it's like 6mm piping. We're going to tie a little knot in one end. That end goes into the jug where the creatures are. This end goes into the aquarium. So yeah, hang on, let me show you. So what we can do is we can just jam this end underneath the lid like so. And then this end can just be clipped into our little jug. Now normally what you would do is you would normally suck on the end that's going into the jug to allow the water to flow through, but we're going to cheat a little bit, and I'm just going to push that on the front of the outlet of the pump, and that starts the siphon for me. You don't need to get a mouthful of salt water. And then if you look over here, you can see the water is just dripping into the bowl. No, it's not, it's a jug. If I tied that tighter, obviously the drip would slow down. If I loosened the knot, it would go even faster. But I think, to be fair, the amount of water that's dripping in there is a good amount. And then, well, to be honest, I'm just going to leave them for half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, let that jug fill up a little bit, and we'll come and see them in a minute and get them in the tank. So I think we are ready to get the crabs, the snail, and the weird worm things that are on a rock into this aquarium. Now we've almost tripled the amount of water that was in this jug, so I've tested the salinity in the jug and tested the salinity in the tank, and they both match. Someone just sent me a message, I think. Tested the salinity in there, tested the salinity in there, both the same. I also tested the salinity from the shop, that's what I was going to say. And the salinity from the shop is pretty much bang on to what my salinity is as well. So they're not really having that much of a big change between moving from A to B. So we should be able to get these little guys in there. We'll get the rocks in first, and then we'll get the crabs in. So let's just move the lighting slightly so I can actually get my arm into the aquarium. Now, we picked up a couple more bits of live rock, just a couple of tiny little bits from their invert system. So we've got a little bit more life going in here. We're just gonna, I don't know, chuck them around the base. This bit's been annoying me since I put it in there, to be fair, because it just looks a bit white and a bit like stand out. So I think we're gonna move that one a little bit back, because I've got a rock with some cool worms on it. So this rock here, and I'll show you close up in a second, has got these funny little tubes on it, and those are little mini feather duster worms. So inside these little sort of lines of gravel and sand that you can see is actually a worm, and on the top of the worm they've got this big sort of feathery head that they catch particles with. Now these aren't the big fancy ones that you do see in saltwater shops that, well, the head sizes are quite big actually, almost, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches round. These guys are tiny, you know, no bigger than a 5p piece, or maybe 2 or 3 centimetres depending on what measurements you work in. Alex from Sanders also did give me this little bit of live rock, which is essentially a bit of a coral skeleton that's like a stick, and I think that will stand out like a sore thumb. So I think I'm just going to place that, I don't know, actually maybe down there, so they've got something to grasp onto. And again, all of these little bits will have food and microfauna and all sorts of bits to keep these animals happy. So for the animals that are a little bit more light sensitive, I'm actually just going to turn it on to blues. Is that on blues? No, that's completely off. Hang on. Let's go 1, 2. That's on blues. I'm hoping, yeah, you can see a little bit better there. So Mr. Snail is actually really, really cool. He's got a bit of coralline algae on him, and he's got a little bit of Cheeto, which is a type of algae. So I'm just going to place him up on that rock, and hopefully he'll find his way from there. And I'm hoping that the algae that's on his shell will spread around this aquarium a little bit. And then lastly, we've got our 3 musketeers. We have got 3 little red leg hermits. They are so wicked. Look, they're already out. Hello. So I'm going to leave the lighting on this blue for maybe an hour or so, and then I'll come back and have a look at them once they've had a bit of time to sort of, yeah, maneuver around the aquarium and find their way, work out where the rocks are and the best hiding spots are. One thing that I forgot to pick up for my little hermit was some new shells. Hermit crabs do like to, well, they swap shells. They get out of their shell, as they grow, they move into bigger shells. So I do need to buy or find a pack of slightly larger shells than what they're in, but not too big, because, yeah. Anyway, now I do want to discuss a couple more things before I finish this video. So, yeah, give them an hour or so, and then I'll bring you all back when I can turn the lights on properly, and we'll just go through 1 or 2 more things, and then hopefully you've got the foundations for keeping a marine aquarium. There we are a few hours later, and everything is doing well. The hermit crabs are currently residing and climbing around the rocks and not coming out too much. They're sort of searching for food and trying to find their bearings, I guess. Our snail has moved up onto the top though, which is quite cool, and currently where he's sat, you can actually see that algae that's growing off the side of him. You do obviously have to be careful with algae and how quickly they can grow and take over an aquarium, but I am planning to have this look more like a natural rock pool than one of those sort of brightly coloured, all corals everywhere sort of aquariums, and that's the plan for this. But we are now fully set up on this aquarium and we are ready for the next stages. So once these little guys and girls settle in, over the next few weeks and months, we'll be adding other things to it. We'll be going and finding our first fish. We'll be going and getting our first corals. I'll be actually visiting a good friend of mine who's got a very beautiful reef aquarium, and he's promised me a few corals, so I'm coming for you. You know who you are. And yeah, we are going to be doing more and more to this tank over the next weeks and months and showing you what the next stages are. But this gives you the foundations. This gets you ready for those next steps of fish and more invertebrates and shrimps and corals. This is it. This is where you start. Now, in the next episode, we'll be doing our first water change. We might even have our RO unit set up by that point, and that will be another video in itself. But all of those videos about teaching how to do water changes, mixing up salt, setting up your own RO unit, they will be coming. Now, I'm going to use a bit of a cheat on this aquarium, and I'm going to use some of the Optimus. The reason for that is that this helps detoxify ammonia. I doubt I'm going to get any ammonia spike in an aquarium of this size with that many creatures in it, to be honest. But this just gives me a little bit of a fail-safe that if anything were to happen, then I'm covered. So, ta-da! It only literally needed like 1 and a bit mil to treat that whole aquarium. So I think it's just worth it for the safety aspect. So yeah, if you're going away and setting up your first saltwater, marine, whatever you want to call it, aquarium from this video, the one thing I absolutely promise you need to do is take it slow. Little by little, bit by bit. Don't go out and buy a dozen different things. This is not a hobby. You can rush, or you want to rush. You want to make sure you take it slow. So that would be the biggest bit of advice. It's patience. If you haven't got patience, you probably don't want a marine tank quite yet. Learn patience. and then learn a marine tank. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see the next episode and how and where we take this aquarium and visiting different things and visiting friends' aquariums and other reef tanks and all of those good stuff. And also our first fish. That's the most exciting bit. So yeah, anyway, subscribe, make sure you follow. I will see you all in the next one. I sort of missed the camera.